So Professor Behera, who invited me here, he asked me to speak a little bit about my journey to this Vedic culture. And I will say a few words about this. Perhaps it's interesting. It started in 1980 when I was doing my PhD degree in molecular biology. For those of you who don't know, Soviet Union, in which I was born, was a strictly atheistic country. Atheism was the state religion. Nobody could even question whether God exists or not. He could not exist because communists didn't believe in him. To me, it was not a compelling reason, but nevertheless, that was the situation. And if somebody would just slightly indicate that he believes in God, he would be expelled from the university system. I had one friend at that time who was studying with me in Moscow State University, and he was bold enough to say that he believes in God. In 2 months, he was kicked out from the university. His only sin, his only fault was that he dared to say that he believed in God. And I was brought up in a very atheistic environment, which was very common at that time. My father was a scientist, my mother was a scientist, they were atheists, my grandfather was a scientist, he was an atheist. Everyone was an atheist, only my grandmother believed in God. And I remember myself when I was 5 years old, I would preach to her that there is no God. Because now I'm preaching all over the world that there is God. But when I was 5 years old, I was preaching to her and I was telling how you are so ignorant, how you can believe in this. There was Sputniks, they're going to space, they didn't see God. So that was the official line of reasoning. So whenever I saw that, there is something, but still, it's very interesting. Despite of such upbringing, despite of such environment, when I was a very small child, I remember very clearly, before going to sleep, I was praying to somebody who didn't exist. Let it be very good, everything, Somehow or other, it's deeply ingrained in the human consciousness that there is higher power upon which we all depend. So, when I was in the university, I didn't really, it didn't change much. The system was very brainwashing system that there is no God, was working very nicely. But I did develop some doubts. While I was studying chemistry and biology, and especially while I was studying the molecular mechanisms of evolution, I just couldn't really buy into it. Because it's so improbable, especially when I went further in my studies and started investigating the nature of life. I could understand that a simple bacteria, the most simple bacteria, is much more complex than anything else which human beings created themselves. And how this, living organism could be created just by chance. It just didn't make any sense. So I developed some doubts, and then I went further into my studies. I became the postgraduate student. I started working on my PhD. Again, trying to understand what is the nature of life. And what was the most striking for me, that the mechanisms of studying the life the methods of studying living entities, living beings, where first you have to kill them, and kill them in a very, thorough way. You have to take apart everything, and then you can only study it. And then you say, this is life. What kind of science it is? You take the life, you kill the life, you destroy the life, you study the remnants of what was life, and then you say, this is the life. This is how it works. So from the very, methodological point of view, I was not really satisfied. And especially, I started reading different articles about the life, how the life appeared. And, I realized that these people don't know anything. They just speculate. There's no clue. Next to us, our institution, research institution, was another institute which was studying exactly this, how the life would appear from matter. And they were trying to do different experiments, and I went there. I was, interested in this subject matter. And I asked them, and they said, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't really, in reality, doesn't work. You cannot really, it goes against the third law of thermodynamic. You cannot really create order from disorder. It's against the natural process. The natural process is from order to disorder. That can go naturally. For that, you don't need any push or any, force. But to create extremely complex entities from something simple, from simple blocks, how is it possible to do, in a very natural way, in a spontaneous way? Anyway, I was developing some doubts, but still, nevertheless, there was some sort of, my life was in motion. I was quite ambitious in my youth. I hope I'm not as ambitious now as I was before. So I was dreaming about achieving something in the science. As probably many of you dreaming now. So that was my dream, and it was not easy to change it completely. But still, there was building up the dissatisfaction of this paradigm of the modern science was building up and building up and building up. And at one point, what happened actually, I had a friend. I was living with him in my university hostel. And he himself first, he met with the followers of Hare Krishna movement. And he didn't tell me anything, because at that time it was very, very strictly prohibited and was extremely underground. But he became a vegetarian. And because I respected him so much, I also became a vegetarian without even asking him, why should I do it? And at that point of time, looking back in my life, I realized the power of association. It's actually what we are. We are not, we tend to think that whatever we are now, it's to our own credit. But actually, whatever we are now, it's all the credit of other people with whom we associate. Because I respected the friend of mine so much, I became a vegetarian. You don't know what it means to be a vegetarian in 1980 in Soviet Union. It was very difficult. You could only buy in the shops cabbage and carrots. Also potatoes. There was a joke, there was American joke. The Soviet Union in Russian was described in Russian language, it was CCCP, SSSR in Russian, but in English it's CCCP. So the American people, they joke that CCCP means cabbage, carrot, and cucumber. And P means potato. It was a joke, but actually this joke reflected reality very much. I remember I was literally starving, becoming vegetarian, but nevertheless, because I was convinced that this is something right, I was still following it despite all the difficulties. So my friend, he became sort of a follower of Hare Krishna movement. He didn't tell me anything besides this very visible change in his character. But at one point, when I was still doing my PhD degree and he was in another city, he came back and he gave me Bhagavad Gita. That was actually the turning point in my life. It was not Bhagavad Gita, which we know now with elaborate commentaries, with explanation of each and every verse. It was just the verses translated long ago into Russian. And I read this book within maybe 2 nights, very quickly, because it's a small book. And I still remember this very vivid and very deep impression which it left at me. You know, I didn't understand anything. Now, after studying Bhagavad Gita for 40 plus years, I understand, I realized that at that time, while I was reading this Bhagavad Gita, I couldn't understand anything. But still, the impression which I had, very interesting impression, is that this book is speaking about the truths which I don't understand now, but it must be there. And if this is the truth, I was not convinced. I didn't, my consciousness didn't switch 180 degrees after reading this book, but I could understand that there is some truth behind this book. Something very compelling and very great is standing behind this book. It moved me so profoundly, as he said. It really moved me. And the impression that the logical conclusion which came to me in my mind, if this is true, I don't know if it's true or not, but if this is true, I have to change my life. So I think this is the only credit which I may claim to be mine. I was little honest, and I was looking for a truth. I was not dogmatic. I was not ready to accept anything just, for the as a blind believer. And what is the most important thing which impressed me in Bhagavad Gita, I could very easily understand that Bhagavad Gita is talking about God. And of course, after 24 years of brainwashing that there is no God, there cannot be God, there is no question of God being there, and so on and so forth, I was not ready to accept this, but what I understood very clearly is that there could be another worldview which is not less compelling and rational with God in the center than the scientific worldview. I was not ready to switch my, affiliations or my beliefs immediately. But what I could understand that there could be, because, the idea which we always had in our society, if it is something, if it's about religion, it cannot be rational. You're either rational or religious. If you are religious, you are irrational. If you are rational, you're not religious. And here I read Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita struck me with this amazing idea that there could be religion which is not religion in the sense that this is dogma. There could be religion, which is actually the spiritual science. This is what I really saw in Bhagavad Gita, that this is the very short but very compelling, nevertheless, description of the spiritual science. And that intrigued me very much. And again, I had this doubt, and I decided to give a benefit of a doubt that if this is true, maybe I should live a different lifestyle. So, and then after this point, my life really changed drastically, partially because I consciously changed my life, and partially because some people wanted me to change my life. I started thinking, and I was trying to compare these two worldviews. One worldview which I was programmed in, which I was, which I was a firm believer, this scientific worldview. I knew everything about life, this chromosomes and mitochondria and everything. I loved it very much. And then on the other side, there is this Bhagavad Gita, little small book with a different concept with gunas, sattva gun, raja gun, tama gun, and everything else. And it's also very scientific. Because in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, if you do like this, the result will be this. This is science. Science is studying the cause and effect relationship. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is doing it all the time. He says, if you do this, this will be the result. Try it. If you do this, the result will be good. If you do differently, the result will be different. So, and I started experimenting in my life how it will be, and I was already a vegetarian, which was a plus point. Even though I lost probably 10 kilos of my weight, but still, it was, still I liked it somehow or other. So from one side, internally, there was a process of, actually there was a dispute, there was an argument inside myself. I was not ready to accept whatever is there in Bhagavad Gita, and I was always, making some arguments and then trying to argue from the opposite point of view, from the Bhagavad Gita point of view. It was going on. It was, I don't know for how long, but this internal dispute was going on probably at least for 1 year. It was not easy. There was a struggle inside me. Is it true or not? What has more compelling reasons for me to accept? Which worldview is more compelling? And it was a very interesting process. But at the same time, and it's also interesting because since then I learned that this is how Krishna operates. He gives you some seed of a doubt, and you start thinking about it, and then he helps you from outside. What happened with me in my life, very soon after I got involved into this, I got involved with these people, and still I was not convinced. And the followers of Hare Krishna movement at that time, they were all, hiding somewhere in the undergrounds, and they were all a little paranoid. It was a really interesting crowd, and I was not really convinced by them. I was just looking at them, watching them. But then, as it was said, the people from state security came to my work. And again, probably for you, it doesn't mean much. For us, people who lived in the Soviet Union at that time, it would mean that you're finished. It was really serious. You wouldn't like to to meddle, to kind of, to deal with these people. So they came to me and they were, speaking with me, and they said, we know everything about you. They always were trying to make an impression that they're all knowing, because everyone in this world is imitating God. The only one who is all-knowing is God, but everyone else is more or less trying to imitate his qualities. So they were trying to make impression to scare me, that we know everything about you, and you better become our agent. They wanted to make me their agent so that I would report to them what's going on. They were really interested in these Hare Krishna people. And they were very, they were visibly alarmed. And that created a very interesting, some cognitive dissonance in me. I knew this, first Hare Krishna devotees from inside, and they didn't impress me at all. And now here we have the most powerful organization, state organization, security, which is supposed to, know everything and, watch everyone. And, I'm not impressed by these Hare Krishna people, but they're very impressed by these Hare Krishna people. And I started thinking, they definitely know better, than myself. If they're impressed with these Hare Krishna people, probably I also have to be impressed with them. So that was my logic. The logic was that if they're so afraid, at that time, in 1980, 43 years back, Soviet Union was a very powerful state with very powerful ideology, very powerful propaganda. It was really powerful state with nuclear weapons, with, the most developed space program in the world, everything. And this powerful state is afraid of a bunch of a very strange people who are without any substance and who are chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So I started thinking, if they're so afraid of this Hare Krishna, maybe I should also look more seriously into this Hare Krishna. So, actually, this is how externally Krishna helped me. Internally, there was this dispute inside me. It was going on, whether it's serious or not. And externally, Krishna was telling me, yes, this is very serious. Yes, this is something very important. So since then, I consider these security people my Shiksha gurus, because they pushed me into this direction. They really pushed me. Ultimately, I had to leave my work. Somehow or other, I defended my PhD thesis, but I was fired from my job because, at that point, it was a scandal. It was a complete scandal. In the Soviet Union, the only one who could believe in God, who were allowed to believe in God, were old people after their 70s and old and useless people. If somebody who is somewhat intelligent, has some brain, and young, believes in God, this is a scandal. This cannot be allowed by the state. So that was, that was a little story. I don't know if it's interesting or not. There is a lot of other, elements in it. Yeah, I still remember very vividly some moments of my adventure when I, all of a sudden became Hare Krishna because I was pushed into it. Now, looking back, and I have to, since then I was traveling practically all over the world, lecturing to different audiences, and I was giving lectures in India also. And I always wonder, how is it possible from me, 5-year-old boy who is completely staunch atheist, I turned into some Hare Krishna monk who is speaking about Krishna to Indians. It's really strange, very strange concept. But I thought it could be educating for you people, because sometimes when we are very intimate with something, or when we are too familiar with something, we don't take it seriously. So, and a testimony of somebody who is definitely very neutral. I can swear to you on Bible, on Bhagavad Gita, no problem for me. I was extremely neutral. I was not biased. I was not blind believer. I'm still not dogmatic by my nature. I don't easily believe into something. But when I encountered with this amazing rational philosophy, which explains the reality in a completely different way, in a very beautiful way, in a very compelling way, in such a details which modern science cannot even imagine. I was moved, as Dr. Shukla said, I was moved profoundly. And what I discovered in my journey, that even though definitely science has a lot of achievements, it has, the scientific paradigm is beautiful in itself, and it's kind of complete, or at least it tries to be complete, even though, in my opinion, it's by far not complete. But it looks, from the outside, it looks quite complete. So many details, so many impressive discoveries, so many interesting things which are there. But the only problem, or the most fundamental problem, not the only problem, there are many problems, but the most fundamental problem is that this Western science, and the science as we know was developed mostly in the West, and the West was developed from the Greek culture. And the development of this phenomenon of science from the Greek culture was very peculiar, because the Greeks, they started their scientific development of the worldview from the most simple elementary principles of geometry. Perhaps you know that in Plato Academy, in the announcement was there, those who don't know geometry, they cannot get in. They're not allowed in. Geometry was the foundation of the science. And it's very simple. As you know, geometry is a very simple, simplistic, logical thing. And basically why they were so much into geometry, because geometry is a process of rational thinking, is the process of proof and, cause and effect. But the whole science, the whole idea of science is that it starts from the simple, then it goes to physics, from physics to chemistry, from chemistry to biology, from biology to zoology, from zoology to physiology, from physiology to psychology, from psychology to sociology, from sociology to philosophy, and from philosophy to religion. So that is the journey of Western culture, from something very simple to something most complex. But the approach, the fundamental approach which is there in the Western culture, is that the simple level defines the more complex level, which is not correct. The simpler level, the level which is lower, cannot define completely in 100% at the higher level. So this is called reductionism. You're trying to reduce and reduce and reduce to something simple which you can know. So that's the worldview which developed from this approach. You start from something simple and you try by applying this simplistic principle, very simple principle, which may work on this level. You try to apply it in a more complex level, but it fails. Every time you try to apply it literally, it fails because chemistry is more complex than physics. And you have to add something to it. And, biology is by far more complex than chemistry. You cannot really deduce biology, life, the phenomena of life from chemistry, even though they're trying. As I said, in this, neighboring institution, they were trying to, make an experiment how from chemistry the life can appear. But it doesn't really work because it's more complex. So now, when I encountered with this Vedic culture or Vedic science, Vedic scientific approach to reality, so the approach is completely different. Any Vedic science, no matter what you take astronomy, you take, even chemistry, rasayana is there, medicine is there, biology is there, evolutionary theory is there, physics is also there, Vedic mathematics is also there. But it starts from the top and goes to bottom. It starts from more complex ideas and try to define next level and next level and next level from the understanding of the most complex reality, which is God or absolute truth, whatever you call it, or Brahman, or consciousness. So that's the different approach. One approach is from bottom up, and this is called Aroha Pantha. When you try to climb up from simple to complex. And there is a completely different approach, which is called Avaroha Pantha, or descending path. When you take, whatever discipline you take in the Vedic culture, they will start with God. They will start with Narayana. Whether it's sociology or astronomy or whatever, God is there. And then you try to understand this particular subject matter from this point of view. And this gives you much better understanding, perhaps sometimes maybe not, how shall I say this, the Vedic mathematics perhaps is not as developed as the modern mathematics, no doubt about it. Modern people, Western people know much more about mathematics than in Vedic science it was really very applied science, very simple science. You may know these details, but still you have better understanding of the whole reality. You have more holistic picture of reality, and then you function more correctly. What is the beauty of this Vedic paradigm is that it gives you the complete understanding, and that from this understanding you can realize, how you're supposed to function in this reality in the most harmonious and coherent way. The problem with the modern science is that with all its achievements, is that the result is that people are suffering. People are stressed. So much depression is there. In America, believe it or not, 56% of people take some antidepressant drugs. 56% of people in this heavenly country, which everyone is dreaming to come, completely depressed, suicidal, and so on and so forth. So what I want to say is that the modern world, which is, very impressive in one sense, it's not very conducive for our well-being. The modern culture, with all its mechanisms, ultimately destroys very important, psychic elements. It destroys, people are lonely in the West. It destroys this, relationship, people becoming very individualistic and ultimately unhappy. And, the number of diseases which are there, diseases which are induced by the modern medicine, by the modern medical science, is also rampant, and it's increasing, and so on and so forth. So this more holistic approach, which is there in the Vedas, even though it may look sometimes, for some people who are very proud of modern achievement, it may look a little simplistic, but it's actually much more profound and gives you much more deep understanding of how you should live and what will be the end result of your life. Ultimately, we all want success, right? We all want, we all want that our life would be, safal, some faults should come to us. So, but what is success? We have to understand very clearly what is the ultimate success. And the ultimate success is happiness. You can achieve so many things, but if you're not happy, whether it, does it matter or not? And if you didn't achieve what you dreamed to achieve, but still you are happy, would you go for it or not? So ultimately, Vedic science and spiritual science is teaching us how to live happy, harmonious life and ultimately achieve, highest possible success, which is the termination of the sufferings in this world. So that's just a few words about my journey. I'm speaking too long already. It's already...
You have kept still confidential what exactly happened after KGB caught you, and how did you deal with KGB? Suspense is still there.
Okay, you really want to know it? So, okay, let me tell a couple of stories. It's interesting. They came to my work, to my research institution, and my scientific guide was a very famous scientist at that time. He's quite famous. He was working with Nobel Prize laureate Gilbert, who was behind this, sequencing. And actually, he was the brain behind this. He was quite a very interesting scientist, chemist who was developing this sequencing process for DNA. And he was very self-confident, very strong person, very intelligent person. And when I came at one beautiful morning to my work, I saw my scientific guide, and he was as white as this, stand. And he was looking at me, and he said to me, "Something is asking for you. Somebody wants to speak with you." And he was trembling. And I couldn't understand what's going on. Very innocently, I entered into his office, and I saw two big guys. They were really... Perhaps I was too afraid, because now I think they were probably that big. They were really big. or probably they appeared to be big to me. And they started smiling at me very nicely. "Oh, you are so intelligent, boy. We know everything about you. Oh, you are so intelligent, and you're doing such a nice work. Do you really want to continue this work? And if you are so intelligent, you probably will understand the consequences of what we are going to offer to you. Please think twice. Don't give us reply too quickly." So there was was a long conversation, and they told me, that we're really interested. We know that you're too intelligent. You cannot be this Hare Krishna. It cannot be. It's not possible. You're probably just, accidentally there, but we want you to report to us what's going on inside. And they told me, we don't expect that you give us answer immediately. You please think 2-3 days, and then you come to us. And they gave me an appointment after 2-3 days. And they told me, if you don't do this, you will be put in prison. You will be in a labor camp. And you will be there, and what will happen with you, and what will happen with your parents, and what will happen with your career, and what will happen with this. And if you serve to us, you don't have to do much, just report to us a little bit, no problem. So, and I came back, and for 3 days, I never was meditating so deeply as I was meditating within these 3 days. What will happen with me? This thought process was constantly going on. What will happen? What will happen? What will happen? This fear is a very powerful force in every human being. So, and they knew. They didn't want me to give the answer immediately because they knew that the more I think about it, the more fearful I may become. And internally, I didn't want to have anything to do with this, but externally, I was thinking, what will happen? What will happen? What will happen? And then I decided to meet with one Hare Krishna follower whom I know and whom I kind of respected. It happened to be a girl, and she was younger than me. She was probably 19-year-old. She was very intelligent, and I was impressed by her in a very nice way, in a very positive way. She seemed to me very intelligent and very normal, and so on and so forth. And I secretly called her, because at that time all the telephones were bugged, and you couldn't really speak on this on the telephone. Everything was, the security was watching everything. So I came to this, somehow or other, I called this girl, and we met somewhere outside. And I told her, they came to me, the security people, because these Hare Krishna people, they were very much aware at that time that they're being watched, and anytime these people from this KGB can come to them. So she was experienced in this sense, and she knew it. And I told her that they came to me, and they gave me this, condition. You either worked for us, or you will be, put in prison, and you will have very bad things. And then she said, what can they do to you? I said, how? They can do so many things to me. They can deprive me of my career. They can put me in prison. She said, no, she said, it's not you. They cannot do anything to your soul. And, you're not this body. Soul is eternal. So, what can they do to your soul? And I started thinking, it makes sense. What can they do to my soul? And somehow or other, it's very interesting, and it's a very instructing part of the story, because this simple phrase of a very simple girl, which she made a very, in a very, by the way, she just said it very peacefully. It really overweighed all the worries which I have in my mind. So when she said this, I became very bold, and I called these people, and I said, I made a decision. I made up my mind. So I came to their office, to their place. It was a secret place in one hotel in the center of Moscow. I came to them, and they were there, sitting there. Again, these two big guys. And they were smiling at me with a very intense smile. It was a very interesting thing. So I entered into the room, and they said, so what did you decide? And I said, I'm sorry, but I cannot work for you because it is against my principles. And when I said this, the biggest guy started yelling at me, what kind of principles do you have except for 4 regulative principles, which Hare Krishna people follow? And he was yelling at me, and he was... But I became so bold because I thought, what can you do to me? I'm the soul. I'm conscious. They gave me such a conviction. I mean, it didn't last long, And I came back, I again became very paranoid. It continued, but with Krishna's help, somehow or other, I overcame all these situations. And then, they kicked me out from the job, and there were many unpleasant things. My friends were put in prison. My friend who gave me Bhagavad Gita, he was in prison for 3 years. Luckily, it was the end of Soviet Union. The perestroika was coming, so he was released at one point. But around 60 Hare Krishna followers were put in prison. Soon after they came, and they were put also in psychiatric hospitals where they were injected heavy, drugs, which affected their consciousness. But, so many first Hare Krishna followers, they were very staunch, and they somehow or other, even in prison, they were preaching to the prisoners, and they were preaching to their guards. And, so many, actually, I personally know one medical doctor who was a psychiatric doctor in this special psychiatric clinic where Hare Krishna devotees were put. And this psychiatric doctor who was supposed to, inject them, which was actually torture, inject them this heavy drugs without any reason, she became also Hare Krishna follower. Because she was so impressed by these people and by the way they behaved and how they, stand for their principles. So it was an interesting journey, but ultimately I left Russia in 1988, 8 years after. At that time it was practically impossible to go abroad. But somehow or other, because it was, again, a perestroika already, they let me out, and I moved to Sweden, and I stayed for some time in Sweden, translating Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita into Russian. And then I came back in '94 after living there, and now I'm mostly living in India. And I'm very grateful to this soil and to the people of this soil and to the culture of this soil. I owe everything to you. Thank you very much.
Hey, any questions?
So, sir, is there any chance for the modern so-called scientific temperament to be happy? Like the happiness that we are discussing.
You want an honest answer, or or politically correct? So, as I said in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes very important principles. And he said that there are 3 kinds of happiness. The happiness in Tamagun, the happiness in Rajagun, and happiness in Sattvagun. And he said that, the tamasic happiness is not really happiness. When people are completely ignorant, when they take drugs or alcohol and they become completely unconscious. They think they're happy, but it's disgusting from the beginning to end. But then he said that Rajasic happiness, happiness in Rajagun, in the mode of passion, gives you initial upsurge of some happiness or some idea of happiness, of some expectation of happiness. Looking in this definition from the scientific point of view, I think that this is sort of experience which people have when they have dopamine release in their brain. It's a dopamine kind of happiness, but it turns to misery. So, scientific world offers some, quick recipes for so-called happiness, but this happiness are of this nature, of Rajasic nature. So very quickly, this so-called happiness turned into misery. Because this is the approach. The approach is, for example, let's take allopathic medicine. It gives you very quick result, much quicker than Ayurvedic medicine, right? You take some pill and you immediately relieved. So it gives you some sort of happiness immediately in Rajagun. But the result is that so many other side effects of this. Whereas you take Ayurveda and, it doesn't work, and then at the end it works. So it's a reverse kind of approach. So the modern approach to happiness, the understanding of happiness is Rajasic. So it gives you some sort of experience which you may interpret as happiness, but very quickly it turns into something opposite to it. You become depressed, you become dissatisfied. Like, for example, drugs. Immediately you get the drug, you take some alcohol, you get some, little elevated state of consciousness, but then you go much lower than before. You become more depressed very quickly. Whereas happiness in the mode of goodness, in the beginning, Krishna says it's like poison, but at the end it's like nectar. So it's opposite. If you have little passions and you try to take this approach for happiness, now you have to do you have to get up early, you have to change your lifestyle, you have to do yoga, this and that. Then you become happy, and this happiness is much more lasting and much more holistic, so to speak. Scientific approach can give you happiness which very quickly will turn into its opposite. And Vedic approach can give you happiness which will be lasting, but you will have to be a little patient in the beginning, and you have to take a little poison before you experience some happiness.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for this talk. It was very interesting, and we got enlightened by your spiritual journey from 80s till now. So I have a question that in 80s when you started practicing this spirituality or just started reading literature about this, people were not allowed to believe in God at your place. So what kind of literature was available to people to read? Because it was very strict environment there.
It was very restricted environment, but people at that time in Soviet Union, they started doing this. Like I myself was typing on this, typewriters, very ancient typewriters. There was no computer at that time. They were typing all these literatures and they were distributing it secretly. And at one point, Hare Krishna followers, they also started, they were printing Bhagavad Gita's huge books secretly. And if you were caught with this, the criminal punishment could be up to 15 years in prison for this offense. It was considered, one of the most severe criminal offenses. if you would distribute books which were not allowed, which were against the official ideology. So, and at that time it was very common, like this Orwell's book. I also read it, but it was typed secretly. And so the first books were like this. They were typed on the typewriter, hand typed, hand, bound, and it was very unprofessionally translated. It was very difficult for me with my scientific background and some literary background. It was very difficult to read these books, but somehow or other still I could see that there is some truth behind this. Even though, from the literary point of view, from the external point of view, it was very kind of rough production.
So Maharaj, what made you to opt this service of translating these books to Russian, particularly Bhagavatam and
Well, we translated whole Bhagavad. And I actually, what happened, okay, I'll tell a story. I was peacefully living in Sweden, and it was very nice atmosphere. I was living in the ashram. I had all facilities. I had even computer at that time in early 90s. It was very rare. So I was working in my translation. And then what happened in Russia, in the meantime, there were drastic changes. Soviet Union was dissolved, was destroyed. Russia became an independent country. All these different states like Ukraine, they became independent. And initially, because Russia for so many years, for 70 years, Soviet Union was very restricted and it was strictly atheistic. And when all of a sudden it became free, amazing phenomena took place. All these people who were atheists, they all started believing in something. There was an explosion of different religions. In early 90s, all different, missionaries of different groups, they flooded into Russia. And Russia was the most, most popular country for them. There were, what not, so many, sects, Buddhist sects, Hindu, this, that, there were so many of them. So, and very soon the reaction came from the established society, and the reaction mostly came from Russian Orthodox Church. Russian Orthodox people didn't like this, it was strange, I must admit, at that time. So,
but
and
the Russian Orthodox Church must not be existing before the break of
Russian Orthodox Church was also suppressed very much. And during Soviet Union, Russian Orthodox Church was probably even more suppressed than anyone else.
Okay.
But as soon as the country became free, Russian Orthodox Church became the main church, and they started dealing with other people in a very rough way. So what happened, why I actually stopped, why I changed my service from translating books, which was my main service from 88 to 94 for 6 years, because there was a lot of opposition inside Russia, and because Hare Krishna people were so visible in Russia. We were one of the main targets of all our detractors, of all these people. And they started moving into this, in the parliament of Russia, some anti-religious, law and this and that. So I was deputed back to Russia to do public relations, to explain to people that Hare Krishna people are nice. If you don't believe it, it's your problem, but we are nice. So that basically my line of reasoning. Anyway, I was quite convinced, because everyone is naturally convinced that he's nice. So, so that was very important service at that time. That's why I came back to Russia and I started doing this. But very quickly, when I came back, initially my idea was that I will start defend Hare Krishna followers from the outside world and from some evil forces who are trying to suppress Hare Krishnas in free new Russia. But very quickly I understood that Hare Krishna followers themselves need to be trained, and they did contribute a lot to this opposition. So, and that's why I became, I started.
And Maharaj, just to add to this, this Orthodox Church has been the enemy number one for Hare Krishna movement in Russia, and now also it is. What is the reason why you are saying that multiple faith has come and invaded Russia, but why they are so dead against Hare Krishna movement?
First of all, it's not that Russian Orthodox Church is enemy number one for Hare Krishnas. It's Hare Krishna's enemy number one for Russian Orthodox Church. For us, we don't have any enemies. Yeah, I know. I'll answer your question. Probably, I wouldn't say that we are enemy number one, but we're definitely somewhere on the top of the list. And the reason is that because they see that there is some power behind this movement. They know that we have philosophy and we have, very coherent lifestyle, which not many people are able to follow, even though according to the strict rules of Orthodox Christianity, it's practically almost the same rules, as we follow. Strict Russian Orthodox people, they have to be vegetarian for almost 300 days a year. There are very few days when they're allowed to eat meat. So they see something which is very consistent, and they see people are very convinced, and they see people happy, and they don't like it. So
this is one of the reasons that the more educated people, they're taking Hare Krishna very seriously.
That's also, and also because there are many young people who are taking, and that also alarms them very much, because many young people are taking to this practice and to this philosophy and lifestyle.
Thank you, Maharaj.
But how do you you are in a situation where you had to actually internalize it and put it into practice, right? And that requires, more than courage. I can't even imagine your situation. So how did you internalize this, and actually internalizing means your practically your identities, whichever ego, whichever ahankar sort of experiences, your job, your career, your life, all those identities are going to be destroyed if you make that choice. And we are so attached to those identities. So how did you, really internalize it and take that?
I didn't. I made this decision because she said it with such conviction, and it had a very deep effect, profound effect on me. Because it's one thing when you hear something from somebody who just knows it theoretically, and it's completely another thing if you hear the same thing, exactly the same thing, which you might have heard hundreds of times from somebody who realized it on a deeper level. So she said it with such conviction that it made quite an impact on my thinking, and also because it was for me it was impossible for me even to think that I would just work for these people. I just couldn't imagine it, and I didn't like. I knew that there will be some dire consequences, but she said this, and it was enough for me. I said, okay, for now I'll just let's do it and let's see what's going to happen.
So how do you see in that situation that this KGBs really didn't punish you? How did you take this?
Well, they did, but see, I'm by nature quite, how to say this, I'm not very flamboyant, even though I'm sitting here speaking in front of all of you, but actually I'm very shy and timid person. At least I used to be. And they punished people who were much more visible and much more outgoing in their activities. And I was little, I was doing my practice and I was associating with people and this and that, but I was little careful. And actually what they did in 87, they called me to the police station and they told me, okay, enough is enough. We have the whole case against you and we're going to put you in prison. And they would put me in prison. But luckily for me, it was the end of Soviet Union. It was already, Gorbachev was already there, Perestroika was already there. So they didn't really want to make another noise about somebody. And therefore, basically, they kicked me out abroad. So they gave me a choice, we'll put you in prison or you go abroad. They didn't tell this, but they actually, when I had this chance, they let me out. So that's how they dealt with.
Maharaj, my question, first of all, possible, thanks for very enlightening talk. Again, coming to the Russian Orthodox Church, they also have, as you said, it's very strict order. They have got good sages, and their sages are also quite practicing and quite ordained people there, including the Greek and the other Orthodoxes. So why that samvad is not taking place at that higher level? Because ultimately they should understand our philosophy. Because ultimately
there are some Orthodox priests who even chant Hare Krishna now. There are some people, in the church. I personally know one person who comes to our, Sunday programs. There are some people who read Bhagavad Gita. There are some people, they wrote to me. I have some letters. They said, you figured it out. You have more consistent philosophy than ourselves. I spoke with some quite, people in the position who were somewhat favorable. But, people on the top positions, they're very possessive. They're more or less, it's not about the philosophy. It's about the power.
Good evening, sir. So you said that you are a firm believer in God and that it is not irrational to believe in God or the ultimate truth. So my question is that how is it somehow more rational to believe in God rather than believing in ghosts or fairies or demons? Because evidence for all of them are like practically zero. So how is it more rational?
I would agree with you that evidence for all of them is practically zero because we have a very vivid evidence of the existence of some intelligence. And the proof is that, this whole world, which is very well organized, is there. If you say that this is some irrational, some completely unintelligent forces who created this whole universe and who created the human beings, who created the life, it's not very rational proposition. So you have to at least, if you have a right to make the hypothesis, let's say, but then you have to prove what is the process, how this highly organized, phenomena which we see around us, how does it appear? How this order appeared from chaos? What is the process? What is the mechanism? There is no mechanism. There is no physical mechanism. There is no chemical mechanism. How this complex, structures appear. So it's not irrational to say, let's put aside ghosts and demons and everyone else, but we are definitely we definitely have a right to say that there must be some intelligence behind this, besides so many other arguments which we may, talk about in some other time. But, besides the problem with the consciousness, which is not being solved by the modern science, because modern science thinks that consciousness is epiphenomena of matter, that this is just emergent quality of the matter in the evolution. First of all, there is no process of evolution. There is no mechanism of evolution involved. But then there is no proof again that, consciousness emerges from the matter. So I wouldn't say that this is unscientific. At least for hypothesis' sake, you can measure these two hypotheses and see which one is more valid, which one has more explanatory power. This is how you measure the hypothesis in the science. You see which hypotheses explain more phenomena in this external world. If this hypothesis, which you have, explains a lot of phenomena, then at least it's a working hypothesis. So, it's I wouldn't be so quick to say that.
So if somehow, if one day scientists figure out the mechanism that life has actually come out from non-life elements, so will that rule out that God created life? If one day scientists figure out.
If one day they figure out, yeah, why not? If they figure out. But still, there are so many other phenomena in this world which are inexplicable by the scientific paradigm, and therefore science rules them out from the scratch. It's not, it's actually, we tend to think that science is totally neutral and accepts anything and, for the face value. No, there are so many phenomena in reality which science doesn't want to deal with because it just doesn't fit into the paradigm. So, like, for example, the past life memories, which is quite proven, there's this, the whole department in Georgia University in America is working for years and years and years, and they have, volumes and volumes and volumes of proof that there is people who remember their past lives, and there is solid proofs that it's not just their dreams, imagination, or near-death experience is another phenomena. So science, because from the very beginning it doesn't fit into the paradigm, they don't want to deal with it because they don't know how to deal with it. It's not. It's just something which is, what to speak about these little esoteric things. Placebo effect. The placebo effect, which is proven hundreds of times, or hundreds, thousands, millions of times, which is well accepted by the medical science. Placebo effect basically means that consciousness is influencing matter, which is completely against the scientific paradigm. Because consciousness, according to scientific paradigm, is an emerging quality of matter. But placebo effect means that there are visible and very tangible effects in the matter, in the body, from the mind. How do you explain it? And because they cannot explain it, because they don't have the methods or apparatus, they just don't deal with it. They say, they pretend that this phenomenon doesn't exist. So if you want to see objectively, you have to take all this phenomena and see which hypothesis have better explanatory power to measure these whole things. But don't cut the reality. Don't try to cut a big part of reality. Don't try to be blind to it. Try to see the reality as it is. And, there are so many other things which we can talk.
Namaskaram. So, like this body, this mind, this emotions and thoughts is the only thing that I have been knowing. And now if I suddenly say myself that I'm not this body and I'm not this mind, so I feel very weird and unsettled. But this is not something that I want to just shun that, okay, there is no spiritual aspect to life. So, I mean, how do I deal with it? Like, I mean, the sense of identity that I have, I feel I'll have to like give up that, or I mean, I'll just have to like break that. And it gives me a sense of anchorage. But how do I let go of that?
First of all, you don't have to worry, it doesn't disappear. You will anyway stay with it. But you add some dimension to it. Definitely our personality is based on our experiences and our emotions and everything else. But if we reduce our personality to this bodily identity, material identity, or emotional identity, or even intelligent identity, or experiential identity, we still deprive ourselves. If we add to this concept that there is a spiritual substratum of this personality, and this spiritual substratum is constant, whereas there is flux of different impressions and emotions and everything. If you understand that there is some stable entity which is experiencing this, if you understand that there is a witness or sakshi of all these experiences, then you can deal with reality and with your, with your body and with your emotions in much more holistic way, in a much more, how you say this, in a much more, you're much more in control of this. Because when you completely identify yourself with the emotions, when the emotions comes and overwhelms you, you cannot deal with it because you are the emotion. But if you know that you are irreducible particle of consciousness, which is not reduced to the emotions, you can control your emotions. If you're overwhelmed with anger and you know this is not good, and you know that there will be bad consequences of your fit of anger, but you cannot do anything because you are this anger, right? You're nothing but this anger, and you cannot really control it. But if you're standing outside, at least if you theoretically understand that you are somewhat aloof from these emotions, then you get the chance to control it. Then you get the chance to rule it, and ultimately your whole life will be much more, you will be much more in control of your life. Whereas if you only think or have this concept that I am this personality, which is quite accidental, I'm this bunch of emotions and bunch of feelings and bunch of thoughts, which sometimes are coming from outside, you are more or less helpless. And you don't know the direction where you're going. Whereas if you know that this constant, eternal spiritual identity, which is real you, then you can go towards the goal and you achieve the goal at the end.
Yeah, thank you so much. So let's thank